Good morning, y'all, and welcome to the Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs Trial Garden. We're going to be exploring the garden a little bit this morning, showing you some of the layout. But what I want to do in this video, since a lot of the things I planted recently, is take you around and show you some larger specimens, potentially full-grown specimens of some of the things I planted, just so you can see what they look like in a larger size. Because sometimes, and I particularly struggle with this, visualize something at its maximum size in the space. Now, some of the things in this garden, I spent several hours walking around yesterday. I walked through the whole garden twice, saw something different every time, which is something interesting about a garden this size. You look at something a little different, you can focus on something a little different every time you walk through it and catch something different. But something I noticed is there are no perennials in this garden, or if there are very few. And that's obviously because this is the shrub division of Proven Winners, and they're going to be showcasing their shrubs. Now, some of the things in here might be trial and they've not been released yet, so I can't show you up close. But the things that are labeled and that I know are released, I will show you those. And we'll start with this beautiful hydrangea hedge behind me. So below here is Let's Dance Sky View. I think this is the underplanted one at the bottom. I'm not sure what the bigger hydrangea behind it is, the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, but it's a really stunning combination. You'll see these get probably full sun in this location, and they're doing really well. So the climate here in Michigan is similar to Ohio. It might be a little more favorable in winter. They're protected a little bit by the lake effect. So the zone's a little different, and they can grow some things here and they might perform better than they would in Ohio, particularly over winter. And it may not get as hot here as it does in southern climates, but it usually gets about the same temperature of hotness and humidity as it does in Ohio, where I'm from. So it's a good gauge of how things will perform in the summer, not necessarily how things will perform in the winter, but it's really stunning. Like, all of these hydrangeas are interplanted together. This bottom one down here is Tough Stuff Top Fun, which I've planted a couple in my garden. I think I actually have 3 now. And I really love the combination of the blue florets in the center, which are the fertile florets that pollinators can pollinate, and then the infertile florets here. So these are infertile, these are fertile, but it's just a really striking color combination on those. This tree is also absolutely stunning. It kind of looks like a lilac, but look at that center branch structure there. Really awesome. What I was also paying a lot of attention to last night was all of the trees on this property. So there are some full sun locations, but there are also some huge, very established trees, and they're like evergreens planted under them, and they look perfectly fine of their tightest form. And it's interesting to see that some of these evergreens can take more shade than maybe we think we can give them. So I'm excited to try some of that in my garden. I don't have a whole lot of shade, but I've been hesitant to plant a lot of trees around some of the spaces where I'm going to have garden spaces. I've primarily done a whole lot of full sun gardening. At my last home, it was a subdivision that was kind of still, it was about 20 years old when we moved away from it. So there weren't a whole lot of trees. I planted more trees before I left. But in those places, you kind of have to deal with full sun locations a lot of time, unless you're planting on like the north side of the house. And here, where we have these very established trees above me, everything in some instances is sometimes underplanted under a canopy of a tree, and they still perform really well. So here we'll see some of the rhododendrons that Proven Winners offers, and this is Dandy Man Purple. You know, in my garden, I planted Dandy Man Color Wheel recently, and we're going to see how that performs in some of my more alkaline soil. And I'm going to give it some soil acidifier every year, maybe twice a year, to try and keep it happy with the pH. But you can see all of these buds that are forming down here for blooms later. Down here we have Midnight Wine Shine 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which is a new 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. Stays relatively small, 1.5 to 2.5 foot wide. Really pretty foliage there. Most everything in this garden is overhead watered by a sprinkler system, so I'm trying to be careful as to not get my shoes super wet early this morning before it's able to dry out. It's going to be really hot this afternoon and a lot of this week, so I'm trying to come out early and shoot this video so I'm most comfortable and the daylight doesn't look quite as harsh. These 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 here, I have one planted in my garden, are sting. They're really striking. They're a nice option for those of us who can't grow because our zones are so low. Some of those really skinny junipers. And they're just perfect as an accent, and I really love this grouping. A new rose of Sharon called 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 Adorned down here below me. Take a look at one of those flowers. Really beautiful there. Look at all that pollen in there for the pollinators. This is one of the 7 sunflower trees. And after seeing it in this garden, I definitely want one in my garden. It is covered with pollinators. They love it so much. They're just buzzing around it this morning. They were all over it last night. It's really exciting to have something like this in your garden that can support a lot of pollinators, because trees in general are some of the best pollinating plants you can place in your garden. Over here we got the Cedar Rapids false cypress, which is really pretty and stunning. Here we've got some interesting shrubs and a tree that I have that I'm waiting to get planted at my house. So this is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 𝗬𝗟𝗃 down here at the bottom. It is a new 𝗬𝗟𝗃 coming out. I think I'm getting sent one of these later in September to trial out. And this is the Showtime crabapple, which you can see a much bigger size than I have here. They've pruned on it a little bit, I can tell, but it's looking very full and very good this time of year when our crabapples typically have declined pretty rapidly. You can see it has darker fruit. The new foliage is a little dark, so it shows off really nicely in contrast there. So this shrub made me really excited to see in a fuller size. So this is the Sarcococa, or Sweet and Low Sweet Box, that is newer to the Proven Winners collection. And I've planted 3 or 4 of these at my house. They can be lightly pruned. They're boxwood kind of companion or alternative. They do sucker a little bit, and I'm seeing some of that here. So something to keep an eye on. I'll show you that. But my understanding is they can be controlled rather easily. So I like this variety though. It has really nice green leaves. In my experience in Southwest Ohio, it stays more green than boxwoods on my property. Very just strikingly green over winter. And then it has a little delicate bloom. You can see the little blooms it's putting on here. So this specimen overwhelmed me with sheer panic, and the reason why is I just planted so many of these. This is Limelight Prime, and this is a variety that has allowed to get a little bigger. So most hydrangeas, the size on the tag are a representation of what they can be maintained at. So Limelight Prime stays a little smaller than Limelight, it's supposed to have stronger stems, but they've allowed this specimen to get really large, and you can see the branch structure underneath there, but really stunning. So I've planted 36 of these along one part of a fence and 8 more of them along the second part of the fence inside my pool area, and it's going to be really exciting when these get grown a little more. I'm going to keep mine a little shorter than this, obviously. I don't want them growing taller than me and being difficult to maintain, and the more you prune on them, the bigger the blooms might be. But you can see on this established one how big these blooms are on these Limelight Primes. Down here next to it is the Stay Classy Purple Leaf Sand Cherry, which I also planted recently. And so you can see what the leaf color looks more like than you can on mine, which has hard water stains right now. So very dark, very nice. Contrasts really great with lots of things in your garden that are that typical green color. These are Illuminati Tower Mock Orange, which I have one of these out front, so it's good to see the sizing on these. They get a little wider than I expected them to get, so that's good when I'm planting or planning to plant things around them. I can adjust for sizing. For those of you wondering about the El Nino Catalpa, or desert orchid, that is new this year in the Proven Winners collection, it is a hybrid. And this is what it looks like right now in Michigan. So I think it can be, mine died almost completely to the ground when I planted it last year, but I got it as a quart from greatgardenplants.com, and it's doing, it came back, it woke up late. It's kind of like a hibiscus in that regard, a perennial hibiscus. And I thought it was dead. And then it came back with a vengeance all of a sudden. And it's probably about this tall, as tall as this little leader right here on this plant. So smaller than this one. This one's obviously more established. But this is a good indication of how big it might get in a northern climate, because in a southern climate, these can get much bigger, I think. It says they can get up to 5 to 8 foot tall and 4 to 6 foot wide. So I don't know that in Southwest Ohio or even here in Michigan whether it will get exactly 8 foot tall, but this is taller than me, so it's probably like 6.5 foot here, this tallest leader. This red bud right here I have planted in my garden. This is Midnight Express. In my garden, the oldest growth is kind of showing what it does here is more green. So this year it hasn't started pushing some of its fall growth yet. So it's a little more olive green color, but it looks like all the new growth on it is reddish to purple, which is really stunning. So these are also, or were last year, planted outside of Spring Meadow Nursery's headquarters here in Grand Rapids, and they looked really stunning as well. So really good, full, very nicely textured, layered red bud here. I was really excited to see this variety as well. This is Rock Steady. It's a Vitex. So Vitex is newer to Proven Winners collections recently. They have a couple varieties, I think. It's a very southern leaning shrub that you see a lot in the South, so I'm excited to add these to my garden. And I have one arriving in September, I believe. This is one of the larger ones, so it can get 4 to 12 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. But in the north, where we're at, it typically dies back in winter, so it can stay a smaller shrub. But I'm really excited to see these in person. They have a very butterfly bush looking bloom on them, and they're a huge pollinator attractor. This is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 lilac, so one of the bloomerang series of lilacs that Proven Winners offers, which means it blooms in the spring when the other lilacs bloom, and then it blooms and reblooms again in late summer, early fall. And you can see that it's just now starting to put on those blooms, and it smells amazing. This is a Winecraft Gold Smoke Bush, which is on a standard tree form. I've seen a couple of these in the garden, and they're really stunning as an accent to add that nice yellow chartreuse foliage color around some darker elements in your garden. This is another one of the Seven Sun Temple of Bloom trees. You can see how big this one is. Still a pollinator magnet. This is a great use of the ground hug aronia, so this is kind of what they're intended for. They are erosion control because they do sucker a little bit, but if you plant them, understand that they will creep a little bit as they grow on, but that's what they're intended to do. But a really nice species blooms in spring. Here's the tag, so you can see it stays really short. Just going to walk through some of these beds so you can see how they're designed, because I really like that most of the beds around here have a slight curve to them. It allows your eye to not stop at the end of the path and keep going and kind of see everything as your eye follows down along the grass line here. Below me we have a lot of boxwood. I assume this is probably a sprinter variety. They're babies, so they're short, but this is a nice way to use boxwood at the front of the border against in the grass line. For those of you interested in the new ilex that are out, this is Glow Pop. The new growth is yellow. You can see a little bit of it here in this plant. It's been trimmed pretty recently, so a lot of the yellow may have been trimmed out, and they're trying to keep it in a ball form. Down here appears to be Glow Stick, which I recently planted, and you can see how upright that is. Really nice. Very tight, very fine foliage. Looks really nice in the garden as an upright accent. Proven Winners does offer some euonymus that doesn't necessarily creep and crawl as bad as some of the older euonymus. You can see them growing here. They can be trained a little bit. Looks like these are very upright, but I love that they're underplanted with this evergreen here. Not sure of the variety. Take a look at this hydrangea, how tall it's been allowed to get right here. You can see the blooms on it, really stunning. And then next to it is what looks like a gorgeous viburnum with all of those berries for the birds in fall. And underplanted, we have all of these hydrangeas down here, which is really interesting. Got some figs mixed into the landscape, which is interesting. I assume this is probably Chicago hardy. I know Spring Meadow offers that on their website. Not sure, but a lot of figs look the same. The fruit is just what's different on a lot of them as far as the flavor. Despite the fact that we were just here last year, it's been roughly 14 months since I visited this garden last time. It looks so different. One, it's a different time of the year, but they're constantly changing things in and out in this garden to trial them as they develop new shrubs. Because they have limited space, they have to take some older things out that maybe they don't grow anymore, or that they understand performs really well, and so they're going to replace them with something new that they're trialing. And it's so interesting to see how quickly a garden can change in just a year, as I know, kind of, because I've been doing that over the past year. Behind me is a gorgeous tree. I just want to show you the canopy and the trunks underneath. Look how it's been trained. It's been precisely limbed up so you can walk under it on this path. It casts a lot of shade, very dense canopy. But this is some interesting pruning to get it up to this form where it's almost like a living umbrella for shade. Here we've got some Let's Dance Can Do, which I've planted at my garden. I've tried several of them, and I was not expecting them to get this big. So I kind of hope they don't get this big in my garden. But they're supposed to be a really hardy cross between a macrophylla hydrangea and a serrata hydrangea, and therefore hold their buds really well and bloom really well. They do have really stunning blooms, but these are way taller than I expected them to get. I planted also some of these next to the sidewalk to the front of the house, so if they get this big I may have to relocate them, but they're still just pretty tiny this year, so we'll give them a look for a couple years, see how they're doing, and if they get too big I will have to move them, because I was not expecting this type of growth. That's what's really beneficial coming to a garden like this and seeing some of these varieties get to their mature size or mature potential, so you can design appropriately in your own garden. This is a variety that I do not have in my garden yet, but I want to add it because it's such an interesting shrub and I've heard great things about it. It's called Montana moss, and it is such an interesting texture in the garden, and it's kind of a low grower. It gets 2 to 4 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide, but a slow creeper. This is a beautiful planting of evergreens and hydrangeas and some Japanese maples. I love how the morning light shines through this area. This is one that stopped me in my tracks as I was watching or walking through last night. This is a laced up elderberry, and you just saw me plant one of these in the last video and see how massive this is. Now these can be pruned back and maintained a little bit, but left to their own devices, as this one seems to have been. You can see how wild and very Dr. Seuss looking it is, but it's a really striking accent in the garden. Creeping around this corner, I really love this evergreen with this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 that's been pruned almost into a hedge. It's really interesting. Oh look, here's a full-size catalpa. So maybe I need to move that one I have. If this one's getting this big here, you can see we're missing one of the flowers. It looks like it just kind of is going out of bloom there. But this has gotten really massive, so maybe I will relocate this somewhere this fall. This is Pinky Winky Prime, so it's a big version of the panicle hydrangea that I planted next to the barn. I'm not sure that I've showed it a whole lot, but I really love these blooms. Pinky Winky Originals, a little more open. These are still open, so they're good for pollinators, but they're slightly more closed. And in this case, I like how the fertile florets are kind of peeking out above the infertile florets in some cases. Really nice. These are some of their newer lines of crepe myrtle. This is center stage coral, which I think I might be getting next, or in September, next month. It's not quite September yet. And in Southwest Ohio, because we have colder winters, they will die down more to the ground and they'll stay a little smaller than typical crepe myrtles will in the South. But I'll be interested to add these to my garden. You can see they're just now starting to bloom here a little bit and have a really nice coral color there. We'll peek down this way, but we're going to head to the other side of the garden on the west side to get a better view of some of the things over there, because I could shoot a video all day in this garden and not cover everything. So I love this hedge of hydrangeas here. It's a mixed hydrangea hedge border. It's not necessarily layered with any specific variety. In some areas it might be, but in other areas there are newer or some varieties just tucked in here and there. And behind it, which I could not see last year, appears to be some red twig dogwoods, which is really interesting. But this hydrangea border carries around a big part of this trail to the other side of the garden. Really stunning. So you can see how mature some of these trees are over here. Over here it seems to be planted a little more further apart. Not as many macrophylla hydrangeas, although there are some. There's more paniculatas and oak leaf hydrangeas and a lot more established plantings as well. So some of the things are labeled, some are not. And so if I see anything that looks interesting, I will point it out to you. Down here looks like some of the new bush honeysuckles that they have on the market, the Kodiak series. Behind here you can see more of those laced up elderberries, and see those are not quite as established, and you could keep them probably maintained a little bit at that sizing. This is a fluffy arborvitae, which I also have in that border. Really nice, and it looks like they underplanted it with wine and spirits weigela, and these are fairly new shrubs, but that'll be a really nice foliage combination there with that bright pop of yellow chartreuse from the arborvitae and the wine and spirits dark foliage. Underneath this tree here, they're purposefully trying to make this sarcococca a ground cover. You can see it's doing a really good job right now. They filled out the front of it here with some smaller plugs of it to get it a little more established. So this will be interesting to see how this develops. This is one of the fairy trail series of hydrangeas that has gotten massive as of the last year. So there's a couple of them planted here, but when we were here last year, it wasn't nearly this big, and it's not its regular bloom season. You can see it's got a couple newer blooms there, but it's primarily bloomed out. But you can see how well this one blooms just based on the aged blooms up here in Michigan. P.S. I love this asphalt pathway through the garden. It's so nice to be able to walk, and it forms a perfect loop at the end. So it would be like the perfect exercise every day to walk this. We're going to veer off the path a little bit because I always remember this spot when I come to this garden. It's a nice little just evergreen garden. It's all evergreens, interestingly shaped boxwoods, like this thing right here. Dr. Seuss boxwood, really neat. Never thought to do anything like that with a boxwood. It would take a long time with certain varieties. There are a lot of newer varieties that grow quicker. That would be interesting to try that with, but isn't that just cute? And in winter, really stunning. This is something I wanted to show you and I forgot at the other side of the garden. So I just planted a blue kazoo spirea, and this is blue kazoo down here. Now this may be several that are growing together, and it hopefully is, because if not, I have greatly misplaced that. They can be size controlled a little bit, and this is probably getting a lot of shade based on these big trees, so it might be growing out a little more than it would if I had it planted in full sun like I do. So we'll keep an eye on that. Like I said, back home I can always expand that bed a little bit. Don't want to expand it too much more because I got to keep a pathway between that and the other trees. But just a sizing on some of these spirea, I think the tag said blue kazoo got 2 to 3 foot tall and wide. So this could be a clump or it could be one. Either way, it can be size controlled a little bit. I made it around the loop to the other side, and you see some more of these panicle hydrangeas over here, along with some interesting more vitex here and some evergreens. This looks like a blue muffin viburnum, those nice blueberries on it. I love this evergreen. I'm not sure what variety it is. Really stunning though. Look at this little garden here. Looks like there's some lilacs, some bloomering lilacs in there. And then it's underplanted with all of these, probably like wee white hydrangeas. Cute. I also need one of those evergreens. Underplanted with all those 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗏. Really pretty. I'm gonna veer off the path a little bit and go down here to some of these gardens. Not a weed to be found, by the way. Nowhere. All right, we're gonna wrap it up with one last hydrangea that I noticed yesterday that I can show you because it's on Spring Meadows' website. It is brand new. I'm not sure they've widely announced it yet, but it's really stunning. So let's go check that out right quick. So we're hydrangea looking. I think it's over here. It's hard to remember where all of these things are, even though I've been through the garden like 3 or 4 times now. I really like this combination. I would never plant it because these barberries are pokey, and so it means getting behind there might be kind of difficult. You can still get around the edge of them here to those panicles, but it's a really nice color combination that complements each other quite nicely, I think. Here we go. This is a brand new variety. It's probably going to be released next year, I would assume, called Powerball. It's on Spring Meadow Nursery's website. I'm not sure that it's on Proven Winners' website yet, but it's a paniculata, so a panicle hydrangea. Gets roughly 3 to 6 foot tall and 3 to 5 feet wide. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Sun to part sun. But the panicles are really short, so they look almost like balls. Really nice, stunning variety here. And here we have probably 5 to 6 of them planted together. Let me raise the camera here so you can see them. But just very different. Immediately stood out in the garden when I saw it because I'm like, I've never seen anything like this, but really, really cool variety here. So we'll end the video right here. I know we only covered just a teeny bit of this garden, but I hope you got to see some of the things that I've planted that will be their full size. So I can imagine them in my garden myself, and then maybe you can get some ideas if you're looking to plant those, how big they might get or how you could better size control them. Thank y'all for following along in this video. Thank you so much to Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs for allowing me to use the cottage as I proceed to GardenCom in a couple days. I was brought up here to speak about contracts because I'm an attorney by day, and so I'm going to be talking to a lot of creators about negotiating contracts, which will be a really interesting combination of my day job and my fun job. Thank y'all for joining me, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.